What if one man's return to power could shake the entire global economy? That man is Donald J. Trump. And he hasn't even officially returned to the White House, but his influence? It's already rewriting trade policy in real time. On April 2nd, during a campaign rally in Michigan, Trump declared, "Every product that comes from China should be taxed. We'll bring back our factories, and we'll stop bankrolling our enemies." The crowd went wild, but global markets, not so much. The very next morning, the Hang Seng Index dropped nearly 3%, and whispers of Trade War 2.0 turned into alarms. Because Trump's not just talking. A leaked draft policy memo confirmed by Axios on April 5th outlines a universal 60% tariff on Chinese imports and a blanket 10% tariff on all global imports. His advisors are reportedly already in contact with Republican lawmakers to prep legislation that could fast-track these moves, whether he wins or not. The message is clear. America first, trade second, allies optional. And Beijing, they're not blinking. Just days later, on April 8th, China's vice premier, He Lifeng, issued a direct response. China will take all necessary measures to protect our interests. We will not be bullied through tariffs. The Chinese Ministry of Commerce has already begun drawing up a retaliatory tariff package, reportedly targeting American agricultural exports, especially soybeans, beef, and wheat, with new taxes expected to roll out by early May. But the shockwave isn't just between Washington and Beijing. This time, America's closest allies are stuck in the middle. South Korea is facing mounting pressure from both sides. On April 10th, a leaked South Korean Defense Ministry cable showed internal concerns that U.S. restrictions on chip exports to China are now threatening to derail a $4.5 billion semiconductor deal between Seoul and Shanghai. Even more complicated, Seoul depends on the U.S. for military defense. China, however, remains its top trading partner. In this war, there's no safe side. And then there's the EU. Just last week, on April 12th, EU Commissioner Valdis Dombrovskis issued a subtle but clear warning. Unilateral trade actions by our allies risk undermining the global rules-based order. Europe will act in its own interest. Translation? Brussels won't blindly follow Washington's lead this time. Let's get personal. Every time tariffs spike, your everyday costs go up. Your phone, your car, your laptop, they all rely on chips, metals, and materials that flow through Chinese factories. Trade war headlines? They hit your wallet. And now it's spreading beyond goods into data, cloud storage, and artificial intelligence. The Biden administration, in an attempt to get ahead of Trump's messaging, just announced a tightening of export controls on AI chips and quantum computing systems going to China. But it might be too little, too late. Because China is already expanding digital trade routes with the BRICS bloc, especially Brazil and India. There's growing chatter about a digital Silk Road 2.0, using blockchain-based logistics and WAN-denominated smart contracts to bypass US-controlled networks entirely. Meanwhile, US businesses, they're panicking behind the scenes. Elon Musk, whose Tesla Gigafactory in Shanghai exports nearly 60% of its vehicles, reportedly held a private call with Trump campaign officials on April 11th, hoping to secure potential exemptions if the 60% tariff becomes reality. It hasn't gone public, but insiders say Musk is deeply concerned about future operations in China. Another quick pattern interrupt. Think about this. You're Australia. China buys nearly 40% of your exports. The US is your strongest military ally. Now Trump wants to slap tariffs on Chinese-linked goods flowing through your ports. What do? This is the uncomfortable reality for America as allies, caught in the crossfire of the world as two largest economies. Even Japan is hedging its bets. On April 14th, Tokyo signed a surprise joint investment framework with China for rare earth mineral development, despite pushback from Washington. It's a signal. Japan is preparing for a world where they can always count on the US being predictable. Let's not forget, this trade war doesn't start in 2025. It started back in 2018. Trump imposed his first wave of tariffs then, targeting steel, aluminum, and solar panels. The hope was that China would fold under pressure. Instead, they built new alliances, diversified exports, and invested in technological self-reliance. Now, in 2025, we're looking at Trade War 2.0, but this time, the world isn't the same. China is stronger, more digitally connected, and less dependent on US buyers. And the US? It's more polarized, more populist, and facing a possible Trump presidency that promises to double down, not dial back. So here's where we stand. Trump's team is laying legal groundwork for massive tariffs. Biden's administration is scrambling to enforce tech restrictions. China is preparing countermeasures through agriculture and digital trade. Allies are hedging, quietly but definitively. And global supply chains? They're holding their breath. This isn't just about trade. This is about power, trust, and a battle to shape the 21st century global order. In just the past 10 days, trade insurance costs for American companies exporting to Asia have risen by 17%, according to new data released by Lloyd's of London. Why? Because every logistics firm, every freight forwarder, every middleman in global trade is suddenly pricing in uncertainty. And that uncertainty has a name: Tariff War 2.0, and no one wants to be caught flat-footed. On April 14th, China's State Council officially added rare earth minerals to its strategic export control list, meaning companies like Intel, Apple, and Raytheon may soon find themselves scrambling for alternative suppliers. To put that in context, China controls nearly 85% of global rare earth processing. You can't build fighter jets, smartphones, or even electric toothbrushes without them. Meanwhile, in Washington, Biden's team is trying to play chess while the board's already on fire. The Commerce Department announced a new countermeasure subsidy plan on April 16th to shield key U.S. industries like microchips and renewable energy from the expected surge in retaliatory Chinese tariffs. But here's the kicker. That plan requires congressional approval, and Trump-loyal House Republicans are in no rush to give Biden any trade policy wins before November. Let's jump to India for a moment. As tensions escalate, India is quickly positioning itself as the alternate trade partner for both sides. In a bold move, on April 15th, India's finance minister unveiled a $3 billion incentive package for companies relocating manufacturing from China. Guess who's already made calls? Samsung, HP, and yes, Apple. Let's get visual. Picture this. American companies are now playing trade musical chairs, jumping supply lines, redrawing maps, and rewriting contracts, all while trying not to upset either Washington or Beijing. One leaked Slack message from a major US logistics firm said it best: "Every supplier we ship from China to Vietnam adds 12% in cost and 4 weeks in delay. But it's the only way to survive." Meanwhile, China's retaliatory tactics are becoming more surgical. Instead of blanket bans, they're retargeting industries that hit political nerves, like Midwestern agriculture and tech stocks that dominate U.S. pension portfolios. That's why on April 17th, Beijing's ambassador to the WTO said, in unusually blunt terms, we have the tools to respond precisely and proportionally. American farmers will feel it first. Now imagine you're Canada. You're exporting oil and lumber to both China and the USA, trying to keep NAFTA 2.0 intact while also maintaining neutrality in Asia. But guess what? As of April 2025, US lawmakers are reportedly pressuring Canadian officials to restrict exports of certain tech parts to Huawei. This came after a leaked memo from the US Senate Finance Committee raised serious concerns about cross-border trade inconsistencies. Translation: you're either with us or you're with them. Let's not ignore the digital battlefield either. China is fast-tracking the rollout of its ECNY digital yuan across Southeast Asia, aiming to bypass SWIFT and reduce dependency on dollar-based settlements. Meanwhile, U.S. Treasury officials are quietly worried that this could erode sanctions power in the long term. Another recent fact: at least 5 major Chinese exporters have already begun settling trade invoices with Russia and Pakistan in digital yuan. No dollars involved. The result? Washington is considering, yes, another round of sanctions, this time aimed at Chinese financial tech firms supporting cross-border ECNY transactions. And while all of this brews, guess who's giving interviews again? Steve Bannon. On April 17th, he told Bloomberg, "This is the final phase of economic warfare. We win now or we lose the American century." Dramatic? Sure, but not entirely wrong. Humor time. You know the world is upside down when Canadian lobster exporters are watching Trump speeches with a spreadsheet open, calculating tariff risks like day traders. Yes, that's actually happening. The crossfire has gotten so chaotic that even Australia, one of the Five Eyes nations, is hedging its bets. On April 13th, the Australian Treasurer stated that Canberra may reassess its investment exposure to US. China-sensitive sectors, diplomatic speak for we didn't want to get fried in someone else's war. So what's next? Which country do you think will lose the most if this trade war explodes further? So far, this trade war has been a war of words, tariffs, and leaked memos. But now, it's morphing into a global game of chess, and some pieces are starting to fall. On April 18th, the U.S. Trade Representative's Office formally proposed the 60% universal tariff on Chinese goods, with an emergency clause allowing for immediate implementation if China imposes retaliatory action before the 2025 election. This isn't just a proposal anymore, it's on the docket. Public hearings are set for early May, and lobbyists on both sides are already scrambling to influence the language. And China? They're not just preparing a trade response, they're going diplomatic. In a surprise announcement, China has scheduled a state visit to Brazil for early May, where it will unveil a $60 billion Latin America infrastructure initiative offering alternatives to U.S. development financing. This isn't about soybeans or chips anymore. It's about influence. Let's break this down. While Washington and Beijing are slapping tariffs on each other, China is building bridges literally in America's backyard. And Brazil is not saying no, because trade wars open doors, and for countries on the periphery, this is their moment. Think big picture. If you're sitting in a boardroom in Berlin, a startup hub in Tel Aviv, or a coffee farm in Colombia, you're no longer asking if the US and China will decouple. You're asking how fast. And most importantly, who fills the gaps they leave behind. Just this week, Germany's Auto Industry Association warned that the new tariff wave could cost over $18 billion in redirected exports and procurement costs. And India's garment sector already seeing a 12% spike in orders from European brands looking to avoid Chinese suppliers. Meanwhile, back in the USA, political pressure is boiling. Trump supporters want tariffs yesterday. Biden's allies want stability. And quietly, they're urging the president not to escalate further before the G7 summit in June. But here's the twist. Biden doesn't want to look weak going into the election. So what does he do? According to insiders speaking to Politico on April 17th, a compromise is on the table, possibly freezing new tariffs until after the election in exchange for China halting retaliatory measures. It's a risky dance, and one misstep could tip the entire global economy. Let's talk tech again for a second. While tariffs dominate headlines, the real decoupling is happening underground, in the code, the chips, and the cables. As of April 2025, Google Cloud and Amazon Web Services are reportedly suspending expansion plans in Southeast Asia, citing regulatory instability tied to US and China conflict spillover. And get this, China's answer? A full rollout of Guangyun, its state-backed cloud alternative across the ASEAN region. Early reports suggest Malaysia and Indonesia have already signed multi-year contracts. A quick laugh. One meme trending on Chinese Weibo this week shows Trump, Xi, and Biden in a tug of war over a shipping container labeled World Peace. Caption: handle with care or don't. Humor aside, that meme says it all. This isn't just about policy anymore. It's about narratives. And whichever nation wins the story might just win the century. Let's pull back. This trade wars with tariffs, tech bans, and tit for tats has turned into something more complex. A test of alliances, a reshuffling of global power, and for many smaller nations, a moment to realign their futures. Australia is quietly deepening its ties with India. South Korea is exploring direct defense tech exports to NATO. Even Saudi Arabia is talking with China about integrating the yuan into oil trade settlements. And the US, still stuck debating how much to punish its largest trading partner, without punishing itself in the process. So who controls the future of global trade? The answer might not be a single country, but a new system. A system less reliant on old world institutions, more distributed, more digital, more geopolitical. We're living through that transition right now. Every tariff, every quote, every backroom deal, it's another piece of the puzzle. And while world leaders argue over trade sheets and shipping routes, the rest of us, we feel it in rising prices, delayed products, confusing headlines, and an overwhelming sense that the world is realigning faster than we can process. So here's your moment to think big. If the US and China both lose the trade war, who really wins? Let me know your take in the comments. I read every one of them. And if you want to keep up with stories like this, the real power plays shaping our future. Hit that like button, subscribe, and stay tuned. The next twist in global trade, it's already happening.